Jeff Durkin with We Are Change CT out here in New York City, where we're here with Derrick Broze, good friend, fellow journalist, and activist from the Ross Ulbricht hearings, which took place earlier this week. He was here during the first day of the trial on Tuesday, and he's here for a few days, and we're just going to get a quick recap of what happened. Derrick, for what happened earlier this week, before we get into the case, tell us about this case and how important it is for just internet, not just Ross Ulbricht for his life on the line, but for internet freedom in general.
Absolutely. So we're dealing with a situation that involves Ross Ulbricht, and now admitted to being the founder, the creator of the Silk Road online marketplace, and he is facing a number of charges that include conspiracy related to drugs that were purchased, supposed hacking software and fake passports and all these type of things. So that's what Ross's specific situation is, and the reason it's bigger than just Ross, as you said, bigger than just his life on the line, is because this is one of the first instances that we're seeing this emerging technology such as Bitcoin, the deep web, the Tor browser, all these things being put on trial, not just Ross, but these ideas and these concepts being put on trial, and they're trying to hold him accountable for the actions of other people on the website he created. So quite, simply, this could be, if this is allowed to happen, we could find a situation where someone goes to eBay or Amazon, Craigslist, etc., and purchases something maybe illegal, and then the owners or the founders of that website would be held accountable. Or say you have somebody coming on a news website and saying some crazy things in the comments, threatening violence or whatever, then potentially the person who owns that website could be held accountable for this behavior. So it's a very slippery situation. It's hard to place specific blame. What they're trying to do is basically paint Ross as this mastermind criminal who created this operation that allowed people to purchase illegal drugs and do so outside of the purview of the state. But it really seems like it's about these technologies. I mean, we've seen them try to paint Bitcoin as a tool that can only be used to purchase illegal drugs. They try to act as if the only hidden services on the deep web are child pornography, violent crimes, horrible drug crimes. The government did a great job of clouding the jurors' minds about the uses of Bitcoin and the blockchain technology, and I think that what they're afraid of is not only what Ross Ulbricht and his ideas represent and what the Silk Road represents, which is getting outside of the Federal Reserve. I mean, that's what it really is about. It's outside of central bank manipulation, fiat currency, and not just in the United States, but this was being used by people all over the world. And that is something that the government's afraid of. We've heard people say that the government hates competition, and they definitely hate competition when it comes to running drugs and selling weapons and things like that. So I feel like when you step back from just looking at the specifics of Ross's case, because there's a lot of interesting information that's been revealed this week, you have to look at this in the context of what is going to happen to the internet. Some people have said this would create, a chilling effect. The EFF and the ACLU are really watching this, as well as a number of other tech blogs and the whole Bitcoin community, libertarian, anarchist community. Those who care about freedoms in this way are paying attention, because they understand that depending on the direction this case goes over the next 4 to 6 weeks, it could be, another stake in the heart of the free internet.
The Judge Forrest and her previous experience with the NDA and striking down the NDA, etc., and then getting it reversed. The interesting thing was earlier, when I wasn't here, but you were here, on the second day of the trial, when the Judge Forrest noticed the jury nullification flyers that activists were handing out in the morning before the court hearings that took place. And it really shows just how the judge really threatened an anonymous jury. Get into that for people who aren't familiar with that, to really show how knowing about jurors' rights are being threatened in that way with this case.
Absolutely. So what we saw was basically activists from New Hampshire, from Keene, and from other places planned to come here. There's for one, there's billboards, signage all around the courthouses talking about jury nullification, which is the power for jurors to basically choose to not find a guilty verdict in a case if they think that the laws themselves are unjust. And this is a power that jurors have, but is widely swept under the rug. And most of us are uneducated about this. Most people are really uneducated about the jury process itself. I know that I was before I really started to learn more about this. And from what I'm seeing with these jurors coming in, they really have no idea. They're just kind of being shuffled around. Okay, go to this room, go to this room. So they believe that their job is just to go in there, listen to the facts, and obviously if the government's brought somebody in there on a crime, then that crime must be legitimate, it must be just. But what we know is that jurors actually have the power to nullify bad laws, and this seems to be something that not only in this case but in other cases that the federal government, the judicial system, is afraid of jurors being educated. Judge Catherine Forrest, as you said, at the end of day one, she made a special announcement because there had been protesters outside with their signs, free Ross and jury nullification, and passing out flyers. And their goal was basically, they were hoping that as the jurors made their way inside, they would be able to, give them, maybe potentially give one of them a flyer and educate them and in effect the decision. So throughout the jury selection process in the morning, the judge specifically, she would never say the words jury nullification, but it was obvious. She said, we know there's some people outside passing out information related to juries and this and that. And so they were asking the potential jurors as they were doing the selection process, have you heard or did you get one of these flyers? And they were either turning people away or just telling them, like, did you read it? And if they hadn't read it, they were like, okay, just throw it away, And then at the end of the first day, once we really the jury selection process had started and they started doing their first witness, at the end of the day, once they removed the jury and sent them on their way for the day, she's like, okay, I have one last, piece of business to handle. We know that those protesters are out there. We know that they're passing out information. And I want to make it clear, and she just kind of said this like publicly to everybody there. She's like, I want to make it clear that if tomorrow morning when we come back to court at 9 a.m., 9:30, if those protesters, those activists are out there, then I will anonymize the jury. And so what that means is basically she'd sequester the jury. So they would put them in a secret location, bring them in through hidden locations, and they would also keep their names private, which they've already kind of been doing, because since the beginning when they were doing the selection process, they were just calling them juror number one, juror this and that, and they weren't referencing them in any, he or she or anything like that. So I feel like they were already anticipating this. But what we've found out, and what Ross Ulbricht's mom, Lynn Ulbricht, has found out, is that anonymizing juries is actually usually reserved for kingpins and for mafia dons and people who are facing similar charges like Ross is, and where the jurors might be under threat, right? I mean, you've got say you've got a mafia don who's like, you know what, let's put the scare into these people, let's put a hit out for them, and get one of our jurors, whatever it is. So if they were to do that, if these protesters were to continue to pass out information, and the judge would say, hey, all right, we're anonymizing the jury, it might send a signal to these jurors that, hey, we're in like a dangerous situation, because we have to remember that the government spent the whole first 2-3 days painting Ross Ulbricht as this mastermind criminal person who was willing to defend his empire with even murder for hire plots, and he's facing those charges in Baltimore. That's a whole other case, so they can't really bring too much of it in there, but they've referenced it a couple times, enough to think that the jurors, if all of a sudden they're told like, hey guys, we need to move you to a special location, you're gonna we have to change up the rules, you're gonna have to stay here, you can't go home to your families, not only would it aggravate the jurors, but it could potentially send the wrong message and affect their decision-making process. So thankfully, the activists yielded to Ross Ulbricht's mom and his defense team, because after the judge made that announcement, the defense lawyer said it like, he was saying it to us and any activists were there, but he said, let me just make this clear so hopefully the press will report it. He's like, these activists think they're doing us a favor, but you're actually hurting our defense. So please, we would ask that you stop. And made it clear, and then that night there was some discussion, but yeah, that stopped, and I think that's a very telling action as far as how they look at jury nullification. I really don't know what it means about Judge Catherine Forrest, because as you said earlier, 2 years ago she was the judge that put a temporary injunction on the NDA and actually tried to stop indefinite detention in America. So, and then yesterday in the trial we saw some hints that she might be leaning more towards the defense side. It's all really early, but that was the jury nullification aspect of it.
And wrapping up quick, you've written several articles about it for Liberty Beat and doing your coverage with John Bush, also from Texas, you guys traveling from here. Where can people find that, to wrap it up here, the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do to cover this trial and bring shed a light on it?
Absolutely, thank you. So you can find a lot of the information we've been doing this first week at thelibertybeat.com. Either myself or John Bush will be back up here in the coming weeks to finish covering on Ross's trial as it concludes. I'll be writing some more articles for benswan.com as well, and you can find all of my articles and work at derrickbroze.contently.com, and that's where it'll be at.
The case is really about the criminalization of dissent and the U.S. government targeting journalists, to prevent them from putting a focus on these issues, such as anonymous and things like that. As it stands right now,
I was charged under the Espionage Act. I was turned into an enemy of the state. That was bad enough. At least I still had access to the court of law, to a due process. I had rights. And as much as the government didn't like that,